Okay, so hi. I really plan to do this as a meeting, so it's a bit more interactive than this, but we were getting dangerously close to that 100 person limit. So I decided to reach out to the company I work for, and they were nice enough to give us the technical support we need to get this webinar off the ground. So this is the format I use, but do feel free to interact with me in the chat and ask your questions. I do ask that you reserve your questions till the end of the webinar, but so that, you know, in the case that in the case that I might cover it later on during the webinar. But if you have any other concerns, like if you think I'm moving a little too fast or I'm not loud enough or something along those lines, please do drop me a message in the chat box and we'll see what I can do. Okay. So there were actually 78 or so people who have successfully registered for the webinar, but only 42 of them are here. But yeah, let's stick to time and let's continue, and hopefully they'll join in later on. Yeah. All right. So as the title says, this is an orientation to PLAB and GMC registration. So what that essentially means is PLAB is the licensing exam, and then the GMC registration is the registration you need to practice in the UK. So I am Dr. Shamnias. Hopefully most of you know me and or still remember me. I graduated in I left Manipal after internship in late 2019, and yeah, and I'm working towards getting to the UK. So I finished my PLAB 1, and sadly, due to the pandemic, I'm a bit stuck here, waiting for a PLAB 2 date. So this is the Instagram handle I use for my PLAB journey and documenting that journey. So some of you know about it, some of you don't. But yeah, so if you are interested, please do follow. So I'm an ambassador for iMedics, which is the company that was nice enough to give us the logistic support to help us through this webinar and give us access to Zoom, for example. And they've been detrimental to getting me trained to organize webinars and indeed speak at webinars. And like I said earlier, PLAB 1, I qualified in November 2020, and I'll hopefully give PLAB 2 in the months to come. So yeah, like I said before, I really have to thank iMedics for all the logistical support and helping me get this webinar off the ground. So I'll anyway talk about them later because they're an amazing company and they do amazing things, and they were detrimental to my starting PLAB as well. I'll tell you that story as we go along. So before we start, what I say is information that is already about 4 to 5 months old. I try to keep myself up to date, and I do try to keep myself well read on the subject, because before even talking to you guys, I am guiding a few people through PLAB, both in my normal personal life and also online through my Instagram account. So I do try to keep myself well read on the subject in order to give people the most up-to-date and current advice. But after this is done, now I'll talk about AMC, I'll talk about USMLE and all that, which are exams that I have not attempted. I'm just talking based on what I've heard and what I've read. So if those are exams that you're interested in, make sure that you do research it and you do look it up. Excuse me, and you do look it up. Otherwise, yeah, you might not have the most current information about it. So just to have some structure for today, even though it is going to be more or less a very casual chat that we're having here, because I know most of you, and that's what I wanted it to be to begin with. Let's talk about what objectives we have. So, so first of all, I'll talk about what exams it is that us as Manipal graduates, us as Asians can attempt. And now, for example, where is our degree certificate license, or recognized rather? Then why did I choose PLAB, and why did I choose the UK in turn? And the other routes to getting to the UK and gaining GMC registration. Everybody can see the slides, no problem, yeah? Yeah, all right, excellent. Excellent, thanks so much. So then I'll move on to talking about how I personally got started with PLAB. And then I'll talk about the steps of PLAB that most of you probably already know about, which is first the English aptitude, which is IELTS or OET, and then PLAB 1, PLAB 2. Then there's a thing called EPIC verification, which I personally had no idea about when I started PLAB, but it's something that you should probably have some idea about. So I'll touch on that as well. And then I'll talk about the UK medical pathway, which I, until also very recent, after talking to Dr. Mo and Dr. Sandu, who are the co-owners of Inspire Medics or iMedics, I only got to know about it very recently as well. So just to give you a very rounded understanding of what the pathway is, and I'm sure a lot of you are concerned about how long will it take for me to become a consultant, and can I become a consultant in various subjects. Then after that, we'll have a short Q&A and we'll call it a day. So hopefully this should take no more than an hour or so, but let's see how it goes. Okay. So how did I start? So people who are close to me know exactly how I started, and a couple of them are attending this webinar. So thanks for joining. So how I started was, what happened with me was I had a problem. There was a big delay in the licensing exam in Sri Lanka, and I was quite frustrated by that. And I thought, okay, so I have to look into other avenues as well. So it was mainly just sort of a last resort kind of thing. But then later on, as time went on, I started looking. I realized that I'm actually quite drawn to what these different medical councils and how they practice their medicine is. So those of you who know me personally know that I've always wanted to, at some point, move to a country where they're actually practicing medicine at the absolute cutting edge of medicine. So that has always been something that was very close to me, and I would have done it eventually. It's just that I chose to do it a little early. So first of all, what I did was, and I recommend that all of you do this, is write it down. Like actually take a pen, put it onto paper, and write down the most important things to you. For example, family life is important to me. I want to have some free time to spend and do the things I like. I also want to be very effective as a doctor. I want to spend a lot of time with my patients as well. But I don't want it to be at the sacrifice of losing all the family time I have, right? Also, then, for example, some of you might think I want to earn and I want to have a certain lifestyle, and that's perfectly fine. After studying all these years, you completely deserve that. So that may be your motivation. So basically, write the most important things to you. For example, if you have, I want to stay and look after mom and dad very closely in my motherland, then obviously moving abroad isn't the right option for you. So you have to really understand what priorities different aspects of your life take. And it's because it's not a decision you should come to sort of rashly, simply because moving abroad as a doctor, as most professionals, requires you take a licensing exam, and every licensing exam is tough, and it's also very difficult to prepare for. So make sure you do the minimum amount of licensing exams as possible. So in this case, so I did the same thing. Yeah, I wrote everything down and I decided, okay, this is how I'm going to move forward. Then I decided, okay, so there are a couple of countries that are options for me, and I did the research on each of those countries. Yeah, so for example, like the living standards, the payment scales, career growth, these are really big decisions to make. So you have to have all the factors. Obviously, you can't have every single thing mapped out for the rest of your life, but it is a good idea to map out the things that you can map out. So that's how I got started. Now, let me talk about the USMLE and why I decided against it. So as most of you know, the USMLE is a very lengthy process. It takes a couple of years. And by a couple of years, I'm being very generous, it takes maybe sometimes around 3 years for one to get into the United States as a resident. But it is an exam where you enter as a resident. But then that's where my second gripe with the USMLE came into play, is that it's very mark-based. So it depends on your USMLE score, and it's a highly competitive exam. So you don't really get the option to pick what specialty you want. You might actually not have the marks to pick that specialty at the end of the day. And something I liked about the British system is that marks are very secondary compared to the actual drive for the person to pursue that particular subject in their career. So yeah, so USMLE is heavily mark-based, and I mean it's their system. I'm not trying to fault the system. It's just the system, and therefore I was not too keen on going through that process. And USMLE, it's ideal that those of you who are in third year or in final year start. If you are interested in USMLE find the information and start now, because now is the time to start. Whereas if you're approaching PLAB or AMC or the New Zealand licensing exam, for example, you can only start after finishing your internship, or at least becoming an intern. So you have time in that case. So like I said, the USMLE structure is very much score-based, like sort of like what Nepal has. And me personally, I was not too keen on moving to the United States at this point of my career. So that was why USMLE is out for me. Then AMC, or the Australian Medical Council licensing exam, and why I decided against it. One is visa. Visa is a very tough thing to have unless you have, or it's a very tough thing to get unless you have family in Australia. So for those of you who have family in Australia, it'll probably be a little bit easier for you. Then you also sort of need a job offer and a sponsor. And those are not easy things to come by, again, unless you have connections in Australia and you can find out. I'm not saying it's impossible, I'm just saying it's difficult. And you do need someone's help to secure a job, and someone to help, you need someone's help to secure a job. So basically, again, a sponsor or an employer of sorts. And also there are problems with specializing, because from what I've heard is that there is a huge demand for ground level doctors or ward floor doctors. But then when it comes to specializing, it's quite competitive in Australia. So that was something that threw me off a little bit as well. And the Canadian licensing exam I looked into it simply because I have family in Canada. But it is, again, something very similar to USMLE in its structure. And so the specialization route is not entirely in your control. You don't really get to pick what you want to go into. I mean, you do get to pick, but it's all very score-based. Also, from what my research dictated was, you do need permanent residency to be eligible to migrate to begin with. Although it seems like things have changed in that department, because they are offering doctors some sort of visa as of recent. It was something that came out maybe about 2 months ago. So if you are interested in migrating to Canada, it might be something to look up into. So while we're all here, this is the subject, the exam I'm doing. And so I'm very comfortable talking about PLAB. So why did I choose to do PLAB? And why did I choose to move to the UK, or to hope to move to the UK? So first of all, it's the GMC registration. It's worth a lot. So with 2 years with a GMC registration and 2 years experience in working in the UK, you can migrate to a lot of countries after that if you choose that UK is not a good fit for you, which, I mean, it's entirely possible that it is, because that it isn't. So if that is the case, you can always migrate to another country, and your GMC registration is a very worthwhile asset to have. If you want to specialize in the UK, there is no bias against telling you shouldn't specialize in this subject, or foreigners can only do GP training or something along those lines. Earlier, so this is information that's a bit old, but earlier there used to be, maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, there used to be a rule, if you were, that you have to have permanent residency, which takes 5 years if you go as a foreign medical or international medical graduate. It takes 5 years for you to get PR or permanent residency, and only after that can you apply for specialization. But that is no longer the case, and whenever you're ready to apply for training, you can apply for training. So that sounds really good to me as well. And like I said at the beginning of the webinar, I always want to work at like the evolution, the evolving end of medicine. So the NHS and how they work is sort of very much at the cutting edge of medicine. So there's a lot of research involved, there's a lot of teaching involved, and there's a lot of growth involved, and that's something that I'm heavily drawn to. Then there's obviously the lifestyles and conveniences of living in the UK, which is always nice. And I lived there as a child for 3 years. And when I say child, I mean really, really tiny child. So I was maybe 5 to 7, 8 years old. So I do remember it, and I understand it must have changed a lot, but I remember it very fondly. So there's a little bit of an attachment there in myself as well. And then this is a bit of a selfish reason, but I'm a big Formula One and football fan, and therefore what better place to be than in Europe. So there's that. So a lot of people talk about the salary scale in the UK and how much you get paid. But the amount you get paid is, it may be lower than another developed country. However, it's not like you're going to struggle getting by. From what I've done, from the research I've done, and for the people I've spoken to, it's not a difficult amount of money to live off. It's actually a very comfortable amount, and especially if there are two breadwinners for the family, it's you're very comfortable. So it's just like when you compare to the US, which is just a really good amount of money, it's lower, but still you're moving to a welfare state. So what a welfare state means is that healthcare is covered, schooling is covered, and various little aspects of your existence are covered. And when you say welfare, it's not like you go to the hospital with some sort of injury and they provide you with medicine. No, if you for example, God forbid, somebody has a stroke and you can't get up to the next floor, the NHS will install a chairlift or something for you in your house. So it's that sort of welfare. So it's a very nice healthcare system to be part of. So I've been told, and from all the research, I've never had anyone tell me that they dislike working for the NHS. So that's something nice to go on. So then this is something else that I did not know when I started. And there are other routes to get into the UK or to obtain a GMC registration. So one is to do the membership exams. So the membership exams are your MRCGP, MRCP, MRCS, these exams for various specialties. So you decide what specialty you want to do, and you can take these exams all over the world, and you do those exams and you pass them. So there are like 3 or 4 parts there as well. And you finish those exams, and then you can get your GMC registration. You can also very recently, excuse me, I have a bit of a dry throat. Yeah, sorry about that. So very recently, AMC and USMLE were approved as valid exams to enter the UK with. However, that was for a very limited time and for a very limited amount of people. So if you are targeting doing USMLE and AMC, do look up into this and see if you may be eligible to enter the UK as well. Again, I stress this was for a very limited time, and I'm not sure if it is even active anymore. But yeah, so do make sure you look into that. But there is one caveat to that, and that is that you should have never attempted PLAB and failed it. So yeah, do keep that in mind. There's another way of getting in, and I'm pretty sure the Sri Lankan kids are very familiar with this, and that is foreign training. So when you on your route to becoming a consultant in Sri Lanka, you have to do a stint 1 year or 1.5 years, 2 years abroad. And after that, you can go offer a job, stay back in the UK and get your GMC registration and settle down. So that's another route as well. So there are the UK medical structure is very different to what we experience in Nepal or in Sri Lanka and Maldives. It's not a very linear path. There's always channels to join in at various different levels. So even if you can enter as a junior doctor, you can enter as a CT level trainee or an ST level trainee, or you can enter as a consultant, or you can enter somewhere else. You don't even have to have started with medicine to become a doctor. You could have started with something else and then done medicine for a bit and then become a doctor. So it's a highly complicated and nuanced way of getting into things. And so yeah, it's not very mark dependent. It's not about your grades. It's more about you as a person and how you interview and what enthusiasm you show for the subject. So I don't know, it really entertains me. It really drives me forward. It's quite a nice system, I think. So yeah, so if you didn't understand what I meant by CT and ST and all that, I'll get to those later on in the lecture, and I'll definitely talk about these things. So how do I get started with PLAB? Now, this is a question that everybody wants to know. And so what you essentially need to do is you need to decide that, okay, so PLAB is the exam for me. And so do your research, like I said, listen to a couple of more webinars. Now, for example, before I started, I listened to the iMedics PLAB A to Z webinar, which I listened to in July. And then I was on the panel in January. So it's really funny how things turn out. But that is what motivated me to pursue PLAB. So make sure you do all your research, attend everything you need to do, take your time with that. Obviously, don't take too much time, but take your time. And once you've decided, the first thing you need to know is you have to have passed final MBBS. So after you've passed final MBBS, then you and you know you have the finances, yeah. So because it can become quite expensive, it's good to know that you have the finances set aside. So after you pass final MBBS, the first thing you need to do is create a GMC account. So this is the site, the www.gmc /uk.org. Yeah, so you go there, you create your GMC account, and so what you would probably do is you'd click here. Hang on one second, please. Yeah, so you'd click here on GMC Online, and you'd create your GMC account, and after that, so after that you have to, so that's basically your GMC account created, and after that you have to move into doing the English language test. So in English language tests, you can either do IELTS or you can do OET. So everybody knows about IELTS. Everybody has at some point heard about IELTS and what it is. So yeah, make sure that you prepare well for IELTS. It's not an easy exam, and a lot of people think I speak English very well, and therefore I should be able to pass. But that's not at all what IELTS is. I know a lot of people who speak very fluent English who had to take it a couple of times to get through it, and that's perfectly normal. And in fact, most people take a couple of times. OET is an English test that is sort of tailored for doctors, and so if you want more information about that, I would recommend searching it up and talking to people who have given OET, because I personally have not. But the general consensus are OET is a little easier to approach than IELTS. So yeah, then so the thing about IELTS is that it is only valid for 2 years. IELTS or OET, both of the two exams are only valid for 2 years. And am I moving too fast? Is this pace all right for everybody? All right, yeah, thanks guys, thanks. So the thing about IELTS is the IELTS and OET is that you should not let it become a hindrance, because your target is to sit the PLAB exam. So just because there's a 2-year expiration, don't hold back on doing it as close as possible to the PLAB 1 date or the potential PLAB 1 date, because you can't book a PLAB 1 date without the IELTS. So don't leave it too late or too close to the PLAB 1 date, because you may fail the exam, and therefore you might miss out on booking PLAB 1 date. Also, if you have it earlier, you might actually get access to an earlier PLAB 1 date through somebody canceling a PLAB 1 seat and you getting access. So always have it done, and always tell yourself, okay, worst case scenario, if I'm not in the UK by 2 years, I'll do IELTS or OET again, right? Because it's much better to be prepared much earlier with the IELTS and have it in the bank, so you have full access to the GMC website. Because after you get your IELTS results, you need to go into the GMC website, type in your results number, and then they'll approve it, and then only can you see the available dates. So that's the way forward. All right. So everybody, another question I get asked quite frequently is, why do they need an English test? Because if our degrees are in English and we've studied in English, then what is the purpose of an English test? And the thing is, I also wasn't entirely sure of that until I started PLAB 2. So in PLAB 2, it's all about communication. So you guys know how we do, how practicals happen in Manipal, yeah, or Manipal or most universities in this region, where you go, you take either a short case or a long case. So that's a history, and then you do an examination, and it's a very structured thing. You know, you already know what questions you're going to ask from the patient going in. Yeah, if it's an MI, you know what you're going to ask, and everything has a very uniform starting point and an ending point. So you go through the motions and you get your history, and it's a very detailed history. But then in the case of PLAB, it's more about you're not being tested as a medical student. You're rather being tested as a doctor in practice. So it's more about, so the interns will know this, where when you go to the ER and you take a history, you don't ask the patient, okay, what's your name? How old are you? Where do you come from? When did you get admitted? Okay, and then date of admission, date of discharge, you go through that. Then HOP, chief complaint, HOPI. You don't go through all of these things with all the time. It's sort of a very rapid thing. And in this case, in the PLAB 2 exam, the patient may, for example, the patient's child might have had a fall, and the patient might be worried. So you have to address those concerns as well. So it's a lot about, you know, back and forth communication between a patient. And it's important that you understand all of that. So you understand all of that, and you need a good control of English to be able to do that, to be able to talk to a patient and address his or her concerns. So the PLAB 2 exam is a very tricky exam compared to all the practicals we've done before, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. The other thing you must never do is talk to somebody who is outside medicine about preparing for IELTS, because in medicine, the minimum required score for IELTS is 7, 7 per subject with a 7.5 overall. So that will make sense if you research a little bit into IELTS. Whereas for other subjects, for other majors like engineering, architecture, it may be less. So it may be 6 or 6.5. So the difficulty of the exam may change based on or the preparation indeed will change based on how tough you feel the exam is. Okay. Right. So this is these posts and this post are 2 posts I've made in extreme detail on my Instagram account about how I approached IELTS. So if you are taking IELTS, I suggest you go through it, because I made a post with all free resources that I used with links and sort of clips of those free resources. So if you need to, you can use these. You can actually use this material to practice. And I checked yesterday, all of it is available still. So do make sure that you give this a look if you are considering IELTS at the moment. Sorry. All right. So then you've done your IELTS and you've passed your IELTS. And after you're done with IELTS, now you're in the PLAB system. So then you have to book a PLAB 1 date. So now due to the pandemic, obviously, as everyone is aware, there is a shortage of seats for PLAB 1, and that's not just for PLAB 1, it's pretty much for all the exams worldwide as a whole. So due to this, I have to reinstate the importance of doing your IELTS in advance so that you have access to the GMC website and you can actually check for dates as and when they come up. And you have to decide, okay, this is a comfortable date for me, and book that date in advance. So IELTS or OET is important to have access to that channel to book your PLAB 1 seat. They have reduced the number of seats for 2020. It was reduced, and 2021 they're gradually trying to pick up. So you guys are quite lucky in the sense that even the interns, once you're done with your internship and you're ready to sit PLAB 1, hopefully things will be back to normal. Fingers crossed. So before the pandemic, I spoke to a couple of people who moved to the UK before the pandemic, and what they said was PLAB seats were never really too difficult to come across. I mean, obviously there was some degree of timing, but for example, during my PLAB 2, when they released the seats booked out in 2 seconds. In 2 seconds, 600 seats were just gone because there were 11,000 people waiting to get seats. And also I heard. So that level of competition will not affect you guys. Hopefully in the near future, because the GMC is working very hard to level things out and make sure there's no lag with the candidates who already sat PLAB 1. So hopefully everything will come back to normal and you'll be able to book your seat. Okay, so let's think the hypothetical. Now you have your PLAB 1 date. Let's talk about how to prepare for PLAB 1. Okay, so I'm not going to get into the gruesome detail of it because this is not a webinar to teach you how to prepare for PLAB 1. But indeed, it's just an orientation as to the whole journey. Yeah. So PLAB 1 is a very clinical exam. So it really, really helps if you are after your internship. Yeah. And so therefore, the clinical aspects of the questions also extremely clinical. In fact, they ask you, what is the management? They're not going to ask you, it's very rare that you'll find a classification of a tumor or cell biology or something like that. So in that way, it's a very it's a very approachable exam, unlike the USMLE, which is a much tougher exam in my opinion, because you have to start from the very basics of medicine and go right up to the more advanced concepts. So in this case, it starts straight where you left off from medical school. It's with the clinical stuff. So how do you treat pneumonia? How do you treat even tuberculosis? How do you treat celiac disease? But you have to understand what are the more important diseases that plague the people of the UK. So that is where I have to talk about iMedics and the question bank they offer for free. All right, so I have a link. Just give me a moment. I'll post the link in the chat so that you guys can maybe register and take a look at iMedics. There we go. So yeah, so basically they offer a free question bank, which is something that no other company that I know does. And their questions are such that you can get a good understanding of what are the type of questions you'll be asked at the exam. So whether you're in third MBBS or final MBBS, or you're an intern or you're after your internship, it doesn't really matter. You can always give this a shot, and you can attempt the questions and see where you stand. And you can also understand what are diseases that are important and common in the UK, and what are diseases, like for example, infectious diseases aren't very huge in the UK, and we learn a lot of infectious diseases. So that information doesn't really translate well, but obviously the MIs, the strokes and all translate quite well. But then of course the management changes a little bit, because they use drugs that are a little different to the ones that we use and used when I was doing my internship. So so this is a good way to gauge what the differences are, and it's readily accessible. You can go ahead, you can try these questions, and it's a good way to understand what exactly is expected from you. The other thing I have to say is that when you are preparing for PLAB, there is no textbook, there is no BD Chaurasya, or there's no Ganong, or there's no book for you to read. There's no refresher, there's nothing of the sort. What you do is you base it on questions. So you subscribe to a question bank, and you go through the questions, and some of them you might get like mocks that you can do. So iMedics offers some mocks when you decide to prepare for the PLAB exam as well. Maybe you can try those as well. So there are mocks, there are webinars which you can attend, where people will teach you the concepts which you need to know, or how it's different from the way we practice on this side of the planet. And that's how you move forward. So you do the question, you understand the concept of the question, you read a little bit around that topic from maybe like the NHS website, or Doctor Patient, or of the Oxford Handbook of Clinical Medicine. So this is how you go. But you don't open the Oxford Handbook of Clinical Medicine from page 1 and you go right down to the end of the book. That's not how you study for this exam. In fact, it's impossible to study that way. Another thing to understand is it's all the subjects. Yeah, so it starts from like anatomy and goes right down to like psychiatry. So pretty much all the subjects you've probably ever had, you're going to have to go through. But you don't have much biochemistry or microbiology or stuff like that. It's mainly clinical subjects, but all of them. So it's one paper for all those subjects. So it can become very complicated. An exam where you can stay up the night before and simply just do or mug up for. You have to have that knowledge. It should be in your core bank of knowledge. And that's how you do this exam. And indeed, that's what they're testing from you as well. So do you have the competence to be a doctor in the UK is what they're testing there. Somebody's asked me, is there a textbook? Yeah, no, there isn't a textbook. It's just a question by question sort of. You prepare through the question banks, and that's how you move forward. Yeah, so there are a couple of other companies that you can access, but obviously their material is not free. But yeah, it's widely available out there. So there's like Plabable, there's past tests and stuff like that, which are good question banks, which are more oriented to the exam. But I do recommend you start with iMedics, because their question bank is one, it's free. Second of all, it gives you a good orientation as to where to start, especially if you're not going to give PLAB like in May. Yeah, so yeah, that's the way forward. Don't study the questions, obviously, study around the questions and move forward. So it's the concepts that are important. Okay, so now understand how much time you need to prepare for this exam. In that it's not just about preparing. You can't just take this exam with like a month's preparation. I mean, you can. There are people who do it indeed, but ideally don't put yourself in that difficult situation. Now, I, through fate, sort of fell into that situation where I had to give the exam with very short notice, and I had about maybe 2.5 months to prepare. And it was me pulling like maybe sometimes towards the end, it was like 16-hour days of studying, and it's not a healthy way to do it. Nor does the knowledge really sink in well. So even after the exam, I had to continue to study to have the knowledge to approach PLAB 2. So ideally, if you have a lot of free time, take about 3 months to 4 months. And if you have lesser free time, maybe 4 to 5 months to study for the exam. So again, like I said, questions and answers, and study around the questions, and that's how you go forward. Then I get asked a lot about the 1,700 MCQs, which is a very common PDF that circulates. So if you have a lot of time, suppose you're giving the exam in November and you have a lot of time to wait, then you can obviously go through the 1,700 MCQs as well. But obviously the first thing to do is go through the main question banks, like Tabable, Past Test, iMedic, stuff like that. Don't go through 1,700 right now, because 1,700 is a bit easy compared to what the actual exam is, because the exam, in my opinion, has become a lot more competitive and a lot more tricky in the last few sittings. So if you ask anybody who sat either the February intake or the November intake, I'm pretty sure they'll agree with me on that. It's a bit tricky now. Yeah, but if you want to just, again, just have a look into what PLAB is like and what are the questions, maybe you want to go to the ethics questions or something, give the 1,700 a look. If you guys want the PDF, you can drop a message in the group maybe, and I'll send over the PDF of the 1,700. Okay, so the actual PLAB 1 exam, yeah. So the actual PLAB 1 exam is the toughest exam I've given in my life. And that is not because the content was difficult, it is because of the timing. So it's 1,700, it's 180 questions, yeah, in 180 minutes. So it's 3 hours and 180 questions. So it's basically a question per minute. And they're quite large questions in the sense that there's a little bit of text, there's 5 responses, and maybe sometimes there's an ECG or an X-ray or a CT scan or something attached there as well. Or sometimes it's just a lot of text and 5 questions, 5 answers. So sometimes even reading through the question, and sometimes you lose your train of thought and you come back and you read through again, and that may take more than a minute. So a lot of people struggle with the timing of the paper and end up not finishing the exam. And every question you don't do is 1 mark lost. The other thing about the exam is it is actually a competitive exam, in the sense that there is no pass mark. When you go into the exam, you don't know what the pass mark is. Nobody tells you it's 50% or 40% or anything of the sort. You go in, and after everyone is done and the papers are marked, they create that bell curve and they decide, okay, so average, this many people have performed with this many marks, and therefore this is the pass mark. So based on how well or poorly people do in the exam, the pass mark moves slightly to the left or right, it shifts. So you can never really know how well or poorly you did at the exam because of this. So it's always best to be as well prepared and as well rested as possible. So this is an exam that if you're giving it in the near future, make sure you get sleep before the night before. And the other thing is bladder control. Make sure you don't have to get up and go and pee in 3 hours, because if you do, sometimes the toilet might be a little bit away. And if you're gone for 5 minutes, that's 5 questions that you will not get to do. And that's 5 marks gone. So bladder control is something that that takes a lot of time. That takes a lot of, that is important for your mental well-being. The next thing is, for example, you might get a statistic question where you need to calculate the sensitivity or the specificity or something, and those questions can't be done in 1 minute, and you can't take a calculator in, so it can take time. So you need to actually make time for questions like that, anticipating that it might come. So it's quite tricky to prepare for, and I don't see many people talking about this. So do keep that in mind. Then we come to PLAB 2. So PLAB 2 is where I am, and I'm preparing with a group of people where we practice on Zoom, where we practice our communication skills. One will simulate being the patient and one will simulate being the doctor, and we have a conversation, and that's how it goes. So you have access to certain academies and all that, which if you want information about after PLAB 1, give me a shout, and or you can find me on Instagram. I'll tell you all about it. So that's how you sort of practice, and then you move into you move into the actual exam, which is like it's basically OSCE stations. So you go from room to room, and every 8 minutes you change for the bell, and you do a case. So each case is different. One case might be somebody who is maybe a suicide risk and you need to counsel them. The second case might be CPR. The next case might be like somebody's pregnant and has some complication. The next one might be a rest station or something like that. So you basically go round and round, and you finish. That's what PLAB 2 is. I'm not going to talk too much in detail about PLAB 2 because first of all, let's talk about let me give you like a holistic understanding of the whole exam pattern. But that's what you need to know about PLAB 2. But before you talk about PLAB 2, what you need to know now is you need to understand that you have to go to the UK to give PLAB 2. So you have to actually travel to Manchester to give PLAB 2. And for that, you need to sort out visa and find out living accommodation there. So it can be quite stressful. So my advice to you is, if you're planning to do PLAB, don't think of everything right now. Think of it as chunks. Like, okay, first let me do IELTS, then let me do PLAB 1, then let me do PLAB 2, and move like that. Okay. All right. So this is the structure to their healthcare system, or at least where it's relevant to us. So we finish PLAB 1, or we finish IELTS, we finish PLAB 1, we finish PLAB 2, and then we apply for GMC registration, right? So between finishing PLAB 2 and apply for GMC registration, there's a thing called ECFMG EPIC verification, which I'll talk about at the end. But once you finish that, you get your GMC registration, and now you're fully registered. You move to the UK. So you can enter the UK as an FY1, FY2, which is a training post, which is 2 years, which is basically the internship. Yeah. So if you haven't got an internship, if you haven't done an internship, then this is the option for you. You will have to apply for this. So there are applications that open once a year. You have to have all your exams finished, and you apply for this, and then you get, along with the UK medical students, you get posted around the country, which is it's a little bit more competitive to get into than the remaining options. The next is called standalone FY2, which is again a training position. So if you notice, let me just get the pointer on. Okay, so this is a training position. This is also a training position. So a training position essentially means that the institution you are working for is responsible for giving you a certain level of training and a certain amount of procedures and education. So that's what standalone FY2 is as well. So for this, there are two windows where you can apply in a year, and you have to have been prepared for it earlier. So you have to finish your PLAB 1, and if you're ready to wait, you can wait until the next intake for FY2 standalone, and you can apply for that, and you enter, and then they assign you a hospital, and you go and you work, and that's for 1 year. So most of the doctors who finish, who get their GMC registration as IMGs or international medical graduates, they enter into FY2 level, which is also FY2 level, not to be confused with FY2 standalone. FY2 level or SHO or a trust grade doctor, these are non-training positions. This does not mean that nobody's going to help you or nobody's going to educate you about the system. This simply means that you are not a trainee, and therefore your job, you will be maybe assigned to a cardiothoracic ward or a general medicine ward or ICU or something like that. So it depends on how long you sign your contract for. It could be 1 year, it could be 2 years. It depends on what job you get and what the length of the contract you sign. Okay. So moving on, so basically all these are junior doctors. You're basically a junior doctor at this level, right? So then you can decide, okay, as a junior doctor, am I going to continue as a junior doctor, as a trust grade doctor? So obviously after you finish your internship, you'll join as a trust grade doctor. So you can either continue the non-trading route, and you get you have a contract negotiation with the trust you work for. Trust is a hospital, essentially a chain of hospitals. So you talk to those people and you get your contracts done and you work for them and in a non-training capacity for a long period of time. Or you can apply for training. So to apply for training, for example, if you want to pursue like general medicine, you create a portfolio. So creating a portfolio is a whole different topic, which I'm sure there are people who are much more experienced than me who can talk about that. But it's all about like doing a certain amount of research and teaching experience and certain procedures and all these things, and you sort of build a nice portfolio, and that's how you get into training. So it's not like in Nepal or in Sri Lanka where you give an exam and then you become a trainee. It's more about doing certain things like certain procedures and basically showing your commitment to the subject, and that's how you apply for training. So if you get into training, then you enter as a core trainee or CT. Yeah. So CT is 2 years, so you have CT level 1 and CT level 2. After which, now generally at this point, you should have completed your membership exams. So membership exams would be your MRCS or your MRCP or your MRCGP or your MRCOBG or whatever. So it really depends on what subject you pick. So you have 2 years basically to complete the membership exam. And after that is done, there's another interview and you get longlisted, and then you get shortlisted, and then you become a specialty trainee. So specialty training is ST or ST, goes from ST3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It can go up to 8, it can be 6, it can be 5. It really depends on the specialty you pick. So there are graphs that show how long training takes. And after that is done, you become a consultant. So as you recall, it takes about 8 years to become a consultant in the UK, as opposed to I think it's 3 years in Nepal and about 5 years in Sri Lanka. So it takes longer in the UK. So then let's talk about ECFMG or EPIC verification. ECFMG or EPIC verification is sort of like this internationally recognized license for your degree. Yeah, so it's an American thing where you apply for it online, and you basically give them your degree details, and then they contact the university and they authenticate it, and they give you a serial number which you can give to the GMC, which proves that you have indeed graduated from this university and it is indeed you who graduated. So it's a long process. It takes some time, especially if they're contacting the university in Nepal or in India or someplace like that, where they can't just make the contacts really fast. So it may take some time, but yeah, so it's not a very lengthy process, and in fact, you can even do it now. If you have your degree certificate, you can do it now. You don't have to wait till after PLAB 2. So what most people recommend is after you finish your PLAB 1, apply for your EPIC verification and have that done. Okay, another important thing, which is not about EPIC at all. Another important thing I want to talk about is this is a journey that is meant to be done together. So the more people you have that participate, if you have a little group of people who are doing it together, it's always better. And what happens is you have people to bounce your stresses off and your ideas off and maybe material off and practice together, especially for PLAB 2. So make sure that you meet people. Ideally, you would have your existing friends come along with the journey with you, but obviously don't force your friends to do something they don't want to do. So if you don't have if your friends are not doing it, then obviously meet people. So go out there, talk to people, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of seek the opportunities for these things. Yeah, don't sit back and expect things to come for you. Don't be an introvert. Be very much an extrovert. Talk to people, listen to their stories, meet people on these forums, join organizations, talk to people, attend lectures, attend webinars, try to do a couple of courses, and try to better yourself and learn more and more about people. And that way, you will be able to find people who have similar interests and a similar end goal, and you'll be able to move forward with them and practice with them as well. So it's a very nice thing to have. And like I said earlier, do your own research. Yeah, and I also have to say that, all the friends and connections I've made along the way have meant a lot to me. For example, Dr. Mo and Dr. Sandhu, who run iMedics, also are people that I've met along the way, and they're really, very helpful to me. So yeah, so it's all about making connections, and that indeed, if you're moving to a foreign country, make sure that that's something that you take give a big priority to. Right, questions? Is there negative marking? No, there is no negative marking. Yeah, I think the only exam I know that they have negative marking is the Sri Lankan licensing exam. There is no negative marking here. If you get the answer right, it's right. If you get the answer wrong, it's wrong. That's it. And then after that, they calculate the pass mark. Any other questions? Proactive, that was the word I was looking for, yeah. Can I do PLAB 1 during internship? You can do PLAB 1 during internship. So how it happens is you can, after you pass your final MBBS, you can apply for GMC. You can create your GMC login. Then you can do your IELTS during your internship as well. And if you can find a PLAB 1 slot, which should not be difficult for you guys, like I said, then you can actually do PLAB 1 during internship. But I think for PLAB 2 and later, you do need to finish your internship. So if you do plan your PLAB 1 to finish, your PLAB 1 to be done just before you finish your internship or so, it should be golden. Your IELTS journey by Priya. I don't follow Priya. What would you like to know about my IELTS journey? Let's move on to a different question. Guys, if you can type your questions into the question and answer box, that would be nice. How much time interval do you have between PLAB 1 and PLAB 2, and what is the implication of IELTS score during that interval? So basically, normally PLAB 1 and PLAB 2 it's a couple of months. So you finish your PLAB 1, you get your results maybe a month later, and then maybe you take your time to prepare for PLAB 2, and then you book your PLAB 2. But in 2020 and during COVID times, it's a bit longer. So like I said, I finished in November 2020. I got my results in December 2020. And I was supposed to book my PLAB 2 in January, but I couldn't because there weren't enough seats. And therefore, here I am in March, still waiting for a PLAB 2 seat. Hopefully, at the end of this month, I'll get an opportunity to book. And if that works out, you'll probably see it on social media. But yeah, so it can vary with the pandemic, but normally it's it depends on how comfortable you are, because PLAB 2 happens every single day of the week, except weekends in the UK. So it's always available. So you can always book at whatever time you feel convenient to book. Okay. What happens if you fail PLAB the first time? Nothing. You book PLAB the second time and you do PLAB again. So if you fail PLAB once, you book it again. No stigma attached with it. People can fail. That's no problem at all. Then you do PLAB, you book the exam again and you do it again. No problem there. Okay, so I've answered that. What if I pass PLAB 1 and fail PLAB 2? How many chances do I get? Okay, so there are a finite amount of chances, but I think it's 4 chances. It's definitely not 2. You have more than 2 options. I know people who have done it thrice. So look it up, but it's not 1 or 2 chances. You have a couple of chances to attempt it. Yeah. All right. What about IELTS? What about IELTS score validity between PLAB 1 and PLAB 2? So basically, you need your IELTS to book your PLAB 1. And after that, you need your IELTS for your GMC registration. So basically, through this journey, you should have an active IELTS. So if, for example, you've done your IELTS expire between PLAB 1 and PLAB 2, you'll probably have to give your IELTS again before booking your PLAB 2 seat. So it's always good to keep your IELTS active. But after you get your GMC registration accounts for your English aptitude. So that is indeed your English aptitude after that point. After that point, you don't need an IELTS. Okay, how difficult is IELTS? So I wouldn't say IELTS is impossible. It's just a lot more challenging than people expect it to be. But like now, see, my approach to IELTS was that I took a very scientific approach because we are doctors and or medical, so we're essentially all doctors, and therefore we study like doctors. So I studied for IELTS in a very similar way, in that I broke it down almost to a science. So I looked up what exactly they want me to write in their essays, and how they want me to express myself. So, for example, something very interesting about IELTS writing is that they don't really care about your opinion. They only care about how you express what you're trying to say. So it's not about, like, if they ask you, do you agree or disagree with narcissism? Or do you agree with Hitler's view during Nazi Germany? You can say that you agree, and there's no stigma associated with that. Your opinion doesn't matter. It's about how you word the whole thing. So if that makes sense. But if you want more details, it's in my post. And IELTS Liz, IELTS LIZ. IELTS Liz she has a YouTube channel and she has a website as well. If you go and look at her content, you'll be able to find a lot about IELTS and how to approach IELTS and what they expect from IELTS. And you can get a good round understanding if you just listen to her videos. I hope that helps, Priya. Any other questions? I'm sorry. Could you please explain the procedure again after PLAB 2 exam and the sources of the questions for PLAB 1? Okay, so after PLAB 2, so what happens is you do PLAB 1. So this is my ideal route. Yes, if you want to follow what I did PLAB 1. I passed PLAB 1, and after that I did my EPIC verification. So after I finish my EPIC verification, I'm going to wait to book a PLAB 2 date now. So for me to be PLAB 1, EPIC verification, PLAB 2, then you finish PLAB 2, hopefully I pass. Then I get my GMC registration, which should take about 2-3 weeks. Then you apply for a job and you move to the UK. Does that answer your question? And the sources of the questions for PLAB 1. Okay, so iMedics is one. So iMedics is one place where you can start if you're not going to sit the exam right now. definitely start with iMedics, because you get a good understanding about what are the topics they ask a lot about, what are the topics that they quiz a lot about. And on top of that, you get a general understanding what is most important and what drugs they use, for example, in their stroke rehabilitation and all that. So that's the best way I could recommend going forward. Then you can use Plabable. Pass Test has a QBank. I think I used Plabable, and I really liked it. So that's something else you can use as well. But obviously, Plabable and stuff are paid subscriptions. What is the visa process like prior to PLAB 2? So if you have a PLAB 2 booking, and you can prove intent of return. So if, for example, most of us don't have the cash to have this journey by ourselves, so we have to have a sponsor. So our sponsors will generally be our parents or our family. So your sponsor has to show their accounts and stuff to the visa people, and prove that you have the intention to return back to your country after PLAB 1. So basically, they don't want an illegal immigrant coming in. This is not an issue for your tier 2 visa, which is your work visa, which you get after you get GMC registration. So visa is a bit of a complicated thing, but there are so many posts out there talking about it. And another thing I recommend, if you're serious about PLAB, is to go on Facebook and join all these PLAB 1 groups or PLAB 2 moving to the UK groups, because they're very interactive and you can learn a lot of things about PLAB and the journey. So yeah, visa process is a bit complicated, but at the same time, it's also not very complicated. So you can go on to VFS, I think is the site, and you can look through all the visa documents you may need and stuff like that. So it's an online application, so they'll tell you what documents they require from you. I hope that has answered your question. Do we get medicine related questions in IELTS? No, you don't get any medicine related questions. That is OET. OET is not, it's not medicine related. For example, the English writing exercises, write a reference letter for a patient to another department sort of thing, but it's not medical. They're not going to ask you to diagnose the location of the stroke, for example. Thank you, Aya. Thank you so much for attending. All right, any other questions? Can GMC registration be converted to New Zealand Medical Council registration, as New Zealand is still under the Queen, like after passing PLAB 2 and move to the New Zealand as a trainee doctor? Okay, so it's an interesting question. What you can do is, with GMC registration, I know that the passage to Australia is quite easy, or comparatively, to move from the UK to Australia, and a lot of doctors indeed do that. And I have heard that New Zealand is the same as well. I'm not sure you can go from here and become a trainee there, but I'm sure you can go from here, work there a bit, and then start your training there. So yeah, that's something that you can definitely do. Is IELTS exam done online or on paper? Okay, so there are two types of IELTS exams. The reason I didn't talk about the two types is because in Nepal, I think there's only the paper-based one. But I think in Kathmandu, you do have the computer-based one. So the computer-based IELTS is the IELTS I did and the IELTS I recommend you do, because it's a very good exam. Because when you write out something and you type it out, and if you misspell a word, it looks incorrect, even though it's not underlined with that red underlining. It still looks very incorrect, and therefore you can type. You don't have to be even fast at typing. If you're like moderately okay at typing, and since we're the generation that's been texting all our lives, we should be able to do that. So you type it out and you look at the screen, and then you can move things around. It doesn't look messy. But when you write something, and if you decide to change the paragraph, you have to sort of cut things out and write it again, which one takes time, and two looks very messy on the page. So I do recommend computer-based IELTS. But again, all the details about that is on my Instagram post. Do it to read if you're interested. But it's not online. Yeah, it's not online. You still have to go to a center and you give the exam. It's just on a computer. It's not really online though. After passing PLAB 2 while working as a trainee doctor, can we be self-dependent financially, in your opinion? Yes, you can be self-dependent financially. Even if you're working as a trainee doctor. If you go by yourself, I think you can live quite well based on the salary scale. If you go with a family, like maybe a wife and a child, you can still do okay. You may not be buying the latest PlayStation, but you'll still be comfortable. So it also depends on which city you live in. So if you live in, for example, London, it's obviously a bit more expensive. If you live a little bit more rural than London or anywhere from the big cities, it's a little bit more cost effective. Thanks a lot. You guys are so welcome. Thank you so much. Any other questions? I'm sorry. After CT, how can we enroll for ST? Okay, good question. Pratik, yeah, good question. So what happens is so it's very clear how you get ST. You have a portfolio, you have that filled up, your consultants sign off, they say, yeah, they give you letters of recommendation, it's all la-di-da, you finish it and you move into CT, right? So you interview for the slot and they have a finite amount of openings and then they allow you to come in and as a CT trainee or a core level trainee, right? And after that, there's another application window where you again show your portfolio and what you've learned in CT and your letters of recommendation and how you furthered your career a little bit more, and you apply for ST. And at that point, excuse me, there's another interview and you move into ST. Yeah, so it's pretty much the same as CT, it's just at a higher level. And yeah, that's how it works. I hope that answers your question, Pratik. The job after PLAB 2 is for 1 year and then you can choose a specialty and work then. Okay, so it depends. Like, so it depends on what you choose to do. So sometimes you may decide, okay, I'm going to work for 1 year and then I'm going to get into training, which is a good plan. So, but maybe you don't get training for some reason, like it's highly competitive and you don't get training. In that case, you might have to opt out of training for 1 more year and work as a junior doctor for 1 more year. But I mean, if you want training, there's always ways to better yourself and get into training. At least that's what I've heard. So yeah, maybe 1 year's experience, 2 years experience, and you get into training. Most people want to hold back on training until they're comfortable with the system, because it's a much different system to the one that we're used to, where you talk about, you're talking about like a very networked computerized system, whereas here we're not used to that, where we're mainly writing on papers and stuff. So it's something to get used to. So it's a nice thing to get used to over time. Do we need a paid subscription for question banks for PLAB 1, or is it free question bank is enough? Okay, so I recommend you start with the free question bank that iMedics offers, right? But if you want more detailed questions that are more oriented and actually presented like the actual exam, you do have to pay for those subscriptions. So yeah, you start with the free question bank, and that will give you a good understanding of how it works, and then move into a paid question bank to really solidify that knowledge and give you a sort of a familiarity to the actual exam. After getting your internship and passing PLAB 1 and PLAB 2, do you go into FY1 category or directly into the FY2 category? So if you've already completed an internship, like the Manipal grads have, right? So you finish your final MBBS, then you, hopefully all of you pass when you get your results soon. Then you become an intern, you finish your internship, you do no less than 365 days of uninterrupted internship, right? So if you're taking breaks in the middle, make sure they're not very long breaks, make sure you don't just disappear. So make sure you have a nice solid internship and no blemishes during that internship. So take that internship completion, you get your degree as well. And then you finish all your PLAB exams and you move to the UK, and you can start as either FY2 level, or you can start as, FY2 standalone or FY2 level. Which is basically a trust grade doctor. But if you don't have an internship, after you finish PLAB 1 and PLAB 2, you have to apply for FY1 and FY2 both together. So that's a 2-year training program. So basically the equivalent of an internship. Right. Any more questions? What's the difference between FY2 standalone and FY2 level, and why would you choose either one? Okay, so FY2 standalone is still a training job, right? So you're put into a hospital and you're a trainee. So people are responsible for training you, okay? Whereas FY2 standalone, FY2 level is like an SHO or an MO job. Yeah. So you enter as an yeah, like an MO level job, and so there's no training involved. Obviously, you can still train yourself, and if you show that you want to learn certain things, there will be people to teach you, but you are not. It's not expected of you that you train. Does that make sense? What is the difference between CT and ST? CT is core training, ST is specialty training. We've established that. CT is like, for example, if you're doing surgery, whether you're doing orthopedics or general surgery, or I don't know, like a couple of surgeries like vascular. If you want to do all these surgeries, you're basically grouped into this one group called core trainees. So you all basically learn the basics there, like basic surgical skills, I guess, and surgical training. So you're all trained together. Then you go into specialty training where you go into general surge or into urosurge or orthopedics or whatever. So you sort of split off. So all the similar faculties have their similar core trainees, and that's why the core training numbers are much higher than the specialty training numbers, because specialty training is very specialized. So you basically have like general surgery, neurosurgery, vascular surgery, or cardiology, neurology, nephrology, and stuff like that. Does that answer your question? Any idea what the pay scales are like for each category, FY1 and FY2? Okay, so I know rough numbers, but I don't want to quote rough numbers. But there, if you Google it, you can definitely find the most latest numbers for pay scale. But what I do know is it's still like the money you earn, you can live a comfortable life. So, so is that all? No more questions then? All right. So before I have all you guys go, I would really appreciate it if you could. Yeah, you're welcome. I would really appreciate it if you guys could fill out this performer for me. So this will help me grade myself as somebody who delivered a webinar, and it will help me assess myself. So I put the link in description in the chat box. So please give it a look. I'll also post it in the WhatsApp group. So if you could just fill that out for me, it'll take you maybe like 2 minutes. That would really help me as well, so I can better gauge what I did well and what I did poorly. All right. So if there, so is specialty like CT and super specialty like no ST? No, it's not exactly super specialty. It's more like basic training in a subject and then specialty training in a subject. So you learn the more general surgery stuff there, but you learn the more surgical stuff like maybe sutures and how to stop bleeding and stuff like that earlier on. Yeah, you guys are all very welcome. Thank you so much for participating. So if there are no more questions, I'm going to end this webinar. Yeah. I wish you guys all the very best, and I hope you guys learned a lot and have a better footing than I did when I was in your shoes. So yeah, all the best for everything. Yeah, I'll see you guys when I see you guys. Hopefully some of you guys will see you in the UK. All right. All right, then I'm going to stop the screen share then. And all right, good night to all of you. All right, bye-bye.